Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. You get to put a bow on the AFC Beast, Andy. This is a heck of a division. I'm really excited we're getting this one out of the way early because it's really gotten kind of the brain juices flowing about how the AFC will be ultimately shaped when the dust settles this year. And huge part of championship equity is going to be determined by who wins this division. And today it is Wednesday, so we are talking about the two teams who are by market more likely to win the AFC East than the Patriots and the Dolphins, who we just talked about on Monday. And I think I am buyer beware about one of these teams.
Yeah, I'm a little buyer beware on both, and one of them is probably just strictly price. And anybody just joining audio and can't see that I'm somewhere else, yeah, my audio might be a little less crisp. I'm going to be on a different mic today because I was at the 3M Open, and it's a long way home. So I already made this joke, but I'm reusing it anyway. I am going to be broadcasting from the most modal location in gambling Twitter history, my mother's basement. So I am literally in my mom's basement, but it's so hot out. Like, it's so cool down here. It's so nice. So apologize. Yeah, apologize if, although we did some speed tests, I was proactive. I met up with producer Dan. He was great about meeting up a little early, double checking the audio and video. Looks like we're good to go. I told my mom not to fucking watch Netflix and steal my bandwidth. I said you have to read a book for the next 2 hours.
She making you meatloaf?
She made me we had brats and some, broccoli salad. It was a nice little dinner. So I'm excited, and also I could stay down in the basement all day. It's so cool down here. So we will start with Dan gets it. We will start with the aforementioned Jets, and I don't remember if we did this on the air or off the air, but there was a little bit of infighting amongst the three of us because somebody said, well, it'll be Jets and Patriots on Monday. And I'm like, I think it was close. And then Drew, I think you said, like, yeah, maybe it is. And then Drew looked, and then I changed my mind, I think, and said, no, the Jets are worse than the Dolphins in the market. And clearly there's some sort of bias to the Aaron Rodgers signing, because pretty much across the market, there's not a big gap, but that gap exists almost wholesale. The Jets are slightly better in the market, even at Bookmaker, to win this division. Again, I'm not sure we've had a 2 and a 3 that have had this narrow of a gap in quite a while. Like, it's only a few points here, and I would agree with that. And I think just kind of burying, we already said buyer beware on both, Drew on one, and man, when I took a step back and looked at that pricing today and gave it a good hard think and did the old hypothetical, I have $100 that I'm going to hand to you in a 357 Magnum. I'm going to train on you here, and you have to make a bet. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably the Dolphins at the price. Mm-hmm. I couldn't quite get there with the Pats, and truthfully, I think value wise, it's there. I'm not saying I'm going to make that bet, but between the two, the roster did look pretty good to me if everything works out, because that's the big question we're going to ask ourselves here, Drew. Will everything work out the way that Salah, the Johnsons, and everybody in that front office in New York / New Jersey thinks? So if you want to take us away with some 2022 recap.
Yeah. I got a crazy one for you, man. Even though I have a great vibes about this Jets defense.
Well, the best vibes.
I have the Jets overall roster 4th in this division. And I am borderline concerned about this offense for reasons that we will get into.
Well,
And
yeah, I'm with you. I think we're going to be in agreement on a couple
upgrade.
things.
This is with the clear and most obvious upgrade on paper at the quarterback position that any team executed in the balance of the season. And really, like the Jets overall, looking at their roster turnover, and we'll get to that too. I mean, there are a lot of names who took snaps for this team who were not retained. I mean, they all stunk, so I get why.
Mike White not on this team. We've been over that.
Yeah, there was guys who were even, Joe Flacco. There were guys who really did not perform, who were on the roster last year, who are no longer on the roster. And yes, they had the biggest net improvement in roster because of the additions of some of the known quantities. Although one of the additions that I like the most, and Chuck Clark shoring up the safety position, not going to take a snap for these guys. So, the Jets are an interesting case. And you were correct. The difference in imply or break-even win probability between the Jets and the Dolphins is 1%. Jets expected to win the AFC East 28% of the time, Dolphins 27% of the time. That's a dead heat. Both relatively far behind the Buffalo Bills, who are the favorite. And, it's a good kind of I don't know what the right word is, but it's a good kind of gut check, because I've heard a lot of people be like, well, man, people are out on the Bills this year. Like, oh, so have people sold too much on the Bills? The Bills' expected win probability of this division is 45%, guys. That's almost twice as they're almost twice as likely by market to win this division than these second and third choice. So we can all kind of cool our jets a little bit here.
Yeah, I think the actual, and I'll leave this. I'll leave this because we're going to talk about the Bills later. But I have a take on that as well. I thought about that a lot today, and I almost, not that we need more content. We can always do more. Maybe this is just something I whip together in an article form or like a really quick 10-minute podcast where I go full micro machines. But the most jarring thing, and I think it's because we consume so much shit and so much gets pushed out of my mind, the most jarring thing about these previews when I'm prepping for it is like how much I forgot about last year. Like, oh my God, I forgot about that game. Or, oh my God, like I forgot that we started the season without Zach Wilson. Like I'd completely forgotten he was injured off the bat. I'm like, oh yeah. And then like that Flacco game in week 2 or week 3 where they were dead to rights. And truthfully, like there probably is a little too much hype around the Jets. That said, there can be too much hype. If Rodgers works out, it doesn't matter, because the step up from like a 30th ranked quarterback room to top 10 / maybe top 5, that can overcome a lot of bullshit. But yeah, looking back at the 2022 season, Zach Wilson was on the mend, and it was it looked like it was going to be worse. It turned out to just be that meniscus tear. Flacco started the year, and then that was kind of our like Garrett breakout game too. He had a couple touchdowns. They were down by a couple scores with like 2 minutes. Scored, onside kick, which never works, score again, win the game. And they kind of started the season a little hot. Zach Wilson came back, and they still didn't lose right away. The next week with him, they got to face Skyler. We've had this conversation so many times about teams that had Miami on the schedule. I feel like we haven't talked about a team that had to play Miami at full strength yet. Every time we bring up someone's last game with Miami, it's like, well, that was a Skyler Teddy game, or that was this. And they beat Miami because that was a Skyler game. It wasn't good, but then they went and beat the Pack at Lambeau, and I understand where Rodgers was, and there's that finger injury. We'll get to that as well. Like, that was a nice win. You beat the Broncos because the Broncos just weren't a team that scored any points, and that was just a gloryful under. I mean, that game obviously sailed under, but then it kind of started to unravel because Brees tears his ACL there. Mm-hmm. The next game, you get a kind of an ugly one. You get all the interceptions. And then somehow I still haven't made sense of that Buffalo game. A lot of that is, and this is what we'll discuss a little too, there was some turnovers in these Buffalo games. And just Buffalo in general. I think that was something that held them back a little. And then they had their bye, and shit got real ugly. We talked about this a little off the air. They had the no touchdown game where it was 3-3 late, and everybody who had like no touchdown scored was getting excited, and punt return touchdown to win the game. The Patriot, like, I believe there was, I'll have to double check. I believe there was under a minute left when that punt return touchdown won the game, which is, the Patriots were the Seahawks last year. Apparently,
Yeah.
they had a lot of crazy endings.
Yeah.
And then you end up, Wilson gets benched. And what happens every time Mike White takes the field for the first time? He comes in, plays a bad team, drops 30 points, which was, that's the Mike White experience.
Yep.
And then, the next week you lose to Minnesota, you lose to Buffalo. And then this was the fun one we discussed. And maybe more egregious than what I'm about to say after this, they only scored 17 on Detroit. And that was a team that could be had. That Detroit team next week went out and gave up 37 to like Carolina.
Yeah.
Which
you bet they did.
And late in that game, Zach Wilson threw short right to CJ Uzomah for 1 yard, and that was a touchdown. After he had a run play for a touchdown called back, he was short. That was the last touchdown they would score since.
Yeah.
They played three more games after that. They had 5 scoring drives in those 3 games. They were all 5 field goals. And those were some tough to watch games. And it was this is a team, like I said, even though some of the wins were a little fluky, they were in a position to go to the playoffs last year, probably well ahead of schedule, which was fun. And then, that second half couldn't have been any fun. And then, if you're a Jets fan, that kind of gets wiped out of your memory. Who gives a shit about that second half?
Yeah.
We're not having to deal with this Zach Wilson debacle anymore. And you have is there a bigger – no. It would have to be another quarterback. There's not a bigger delta at win probability per game, EPA per play, anything you want to use than, trading up from Flacco, White, Wilson to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something, but like you said, the roster had some turnover, and I want to hear your opinion on that. I like your opinion on a lot of it because you do a good job of, grading the positional groups with the changes.
Well, I just want to go back to the futility late in the season for this offense. When you're struggling to score a touchdown in a game, when you're putting together 1, 2, 3 scoring drives in the matter of a few weeks, who I think of immediately who can fix that situation with their offensive scheme and play calling? Nathaniel Hackett.
Kirk Ferentz?
No, Kirk Ferentz. Yeah, no, like the idea that Nathaniel Hackett was the choice to fix this offense overall is that's a tough one. That one's going to be tough. And if he proves me wrong, because he's got some synergy with Aaron Rodgers, then I will eat I'll eat my crow salad or whatever. But we'll talk.
What do you think?
Lateral negative.
Yeah. What do you think drove that decision the most? Was it just we think this is the Rodgers bait we need? Because the track record he's had, obviously, even let's throw out the head coaching. When he's called plays as an offensive coordinator in other spots,
Jags.
It wasn't.
You got to go back to Bortles Jags. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. And some of those teams, we do have to give them quite a bit of benefit of the doubt because of the players he had on those rosters.
Yeah, and that was so long ago. Like, even if he rolls out the best of that stretch, like, it's still a very different NFL now.
It is. So it's hard to justify that, but at the same time, it's not like an impressive resume. Yeah, and it got worse with the Denver stuff.
Yeah, I think you did a great job recapping 2022, and it kind of goes to it falls directly in the bucket of like how much the sequencing of events colors your perception of teams.
It really
because Andy, last year, by any measure, from preseason expectation to what you got, that was a success. Do you
think the awards? The awards, they won both Rookie of the Year. Saleh was being talked about as Coach of the Year for a bit. I think that colors your expectations. Like, well, this is a team that had both Rookie of the Years. They hit their win total. Like, this was a good year.
I don't know this for sure.
It was a good first half.
Yeah, I don't know this for sure, but I think they might have been the first win total over to cash. Because they got to 6 wins by week 9.
Yeah, their win total is like 4.5, 5.5.
5.5 wins. Yeah, they were one of the bigger overachievers last year, guys.
I think probably them and Seattle. Them and Seattle had to be 2 of the first ones to catch.
Yeah, that's a good. Seattle probably was right in that mix too. Maybe both of them like around week 8, week 9. But it was week 9 that the Jets logged their 6th win. They were 6-3. They were in the playoff mix. Like, they had a wild card spot. Solid grip on it. They beat the Bills. They just beat the Bills.
Yeah, we were talking division.
Oh, sure. We were talking. Is there going to be a home game in the Meadowlands? Wow. No, it was really something to start the season. And I think the first sign of trouble was that Patriots loss, because that was the game where Zach Wilson had last year was ultimately going to be determined a success or a failure based on the development of Zach Wilson more than any other kind of measure. Forget making your win total, forget almost getting a playoff spot, forget taking a step forward, total winning, wins for your franchise. If Wilson was a failure, then you had a problem, because this is now how many quarterbacks in a row? Wilson, Darnold. I don't even know if I'm going in order, but Geno Smith, Sanchez, Chad Pennington. Like the list of guys that, Chad Pennington probably maybe the most successful of the guys they just wrecked.
I was going to say,
but
Sanchez probably was from a team standpoint, but he just happened to be there at the right time. For that,
yeah, right place, right time.
That defense, yeah.
And Rex Ryan in a having a moment. You had a couple of years of Fitzpatrick in there. You had a year with McCown. You had a Brett Favre year. It has been lean pickings in terms of quarterbacks you could really get behind in the Meadowlands. And so, that was sort of the entire prism through the way that the team was viewed last season. Forget about all the young draft picks you had showing up and kicking ass. Forget about having a stretch of winning football and beating some of your divisional opponents. The real trouble, I think, was that week 8 game where you lost to the Patriots 22-17. Your defense kept you in that game, and Zach Wilson took you out of it. And some of his specific play in that game was like inexcusable. Like, there were times where he was creating, he was eluding pressure in the pocket. He was rolling out, and he just threw like a what the fuck kind of looked like a throwaway that got picked. And you're like, okay, this is the time of year. This is the time of your progression where the game should be slowing down for you, and it is not. That is a problem. And they looked into, a win the next week against the Bills, went to their bye, and then it was basically, the pressure and the commentary about Zach Wilson never slowed down, and he rolled downhill from there into the getting benched. He lost the locker room too, if I remember correctly. He came out after a bad game. It might have been that Patriots game, and they were like, "You take any responsibility for this?" And he's like, "No." And then it was that, that combined with the actual performance was, was like, like, and, this team might be a hot sell. It's still amazing to me looking at some of their, their win-loss against the spread. They just finished 8-9 against the spread. They did not cover down the stretch in addition to losing. And that said, the market never quit on these guys, Andy. Did you know that they were favored in their last 4 games? They were favored against the Lions. I'm not making this up. The market closed. No. Jets favored against the Lions, favored against the Jags, favored against the Seahawks, and favored against the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins was Skylar Thompson, I believe, but the other 4 teams were in the playoff hunt, and the Jets were favored over them. What?
And
The market was on psychedelics that Aaron Rodgers adopted. How in the world?
The Dolphins game is a good. Here's why. We mentioned the Jets did not score.
I got a correction and retraction. They were 3.5-point dogs to the Dolphins. My bad. I knew that because we talked about it on Monday. But they 3 games in a row against playoff teams in your favor. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nobody scored a touchdown. We did get our no touchdown game with the Jets eventually. Took to week 18. Part of it was the ascension of that defense. The defense was very good. Like I mentioned, it's embarrassing to only put up 17 against the Lions, but they held the Lions to a reasonable amount of points. All those games they lost, they held those offenses to reasonable amounts of points. Even the Vikings, who by all, that was it, US Bank, and that was a very, very good offense. They held them, to 27. They had a sniff at winning that game. They obviously the Bears offense wasn't much to talk about, but they didn't let the Patriots offense score more than 3. That's the thing. They gave up 3 points as a defense. They lost that game. It's like what we said when we did Denver. Like eventually this defense is going to be fucking sick of it. Like, were, some of them might have been out there for that special teams play, but like, man, we let up 3 points today and we lost the game, guys.
Yeah.
So,
dude. You think you nailed it. The Jets were Denver East.
Yeah.
They were 5-12 to the under.
And now they have Hackett. They want to be Denver so bad. They wouldn't got Hackett. So all right, let's talk about some of
they got Hackett and they recruited and pulled a career old quarterback from another team who's coming off of an unimpressive season.
Who does cringe content?
Not
like
what? What is happening here? I feel like I'm on ayahuasca.
We got Freaky Friday, so yeah. Let's talk about some of the changes outside of the quarterback.
Okay.
And you can go over that. And this is one of the biggest things when you said, I'm looking at this roster and I rate it 4th in the division. I struggle to have them behind New England in some spots, but if Garrett Wilson is your true number 1, which he is, that you do lack something at the 2 and the 3. And granted, that's tough to stomach when we've seen this where Rodgers' win was Rodgers at his best. It was when he had Devontae. He needs a true number 1. And Garrett Wilson was great, but it was 1 year. We've seen flashes in the band. I think he was great for, hey, you don't have a whole lot of else.
Yeah, sure. He was.
You are going to be leaned on. So if he regresses at all, it's kind of a bad wide receiver room. And then, another thing about Rodgers, I just mentioned when was he great with Devonta, like over the last few seasons, it's been, despite the injuries, he's had pretty good protection. He's getting a downgrade at offensive line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I don't know that he's getting some huge, if Garrett Wilson plays at a level he did last year, he's getting an overall upgrade, but the depth at wide receiver isn't great. But, you're probably getting a downgrade at offensive line. And I mean, there's still some flux there today. Yeah. There's news coming out there. There's a lot of questions to be answered about this offensive line as a whole before we even get to the season.
Yeah. Yep. So let's go over personnel changes. Amazingly, 11 of the guys the Jets elected not to bring back this year are still out of the league. That's the highest number I've ever seen for any of these teams as we've gone through this exercise. They had 11 guys.
So that says you made the right decision, but it also says, like, what was he doing in your roster last year?
Yeah, why was he on your roster? It may be, I forget, did James Robinson get signed? Maybe it is 10, but whatever the case is, there are a number of guys.
True. Running backs are getting signed left and right now.
Okay. Well, there are a number of guys
he might be
that
on a
did
team,
not.
honestly.
That did not. I think he might be too. I feel like I saw somebody signed him as a fight. And actually, you know what? It might have been the Giants before they got the sack deal done. But yeah, there were a bunch of guys that didn't get retained. Of the guys that you lost who matter, Sheldon Rankins, I got a fine score for him. I think that was a little bit of being in Quinn Williams' shadow more so than Rankins being a guy. He is now in Houston, I think, as a backup. You lose Nate Herbig, who was not very good. He is now depth in Pittsburgh at the offensive line position. That and Elijah Moore, I think, is worth mentioning just because I think overall you are talking about a downgrade to your skill position group from last year to this year because your additions were Alan Lazard, who is already a question mark about availability, Randall Cobb, who is his best years were in 2016 or so, and Mecole Hardman, who, if he couldn't make it work with Pat Mahomes in Kansas City, I'm not sure he makes it work here. So I think overall the skill position.
If he can make it here,
if he can make it here, though, he can make it anywhere. All right, man. The other additions worth mentioning, after Chuck Clark went down, they immediately went out and grabbed Adrian Amos. I think they recognized that they could not have a weak link in their system, and their safeties were already the weakest part of their defense because otherwise it is a studded unit. I mean, the big question really is just who are you getting in terms of an Aaron Rodgers? Are you getting a guy that has a ceiling that is 2 years ago's MVP candidate, or are you getting a guy that is on the decline because the game is continuing to evolve and a lot of what he does specifically has been taken away? And he knows, not as especially willing to take chances with young skill position groups down the field. That's kind of been his MO. I guess, let me ask you just a general opinion question of Rodgers, because this is kind of where it all revolves around your thoughts about the Jets this season and starting out and your offseason, your read on their offseason grade. What is your reflection on the 2 MVP seasons that he had? In whatever it was, 21 and 20, I guess 20 and 21. Do those sit well with you, that he was the best player in the NFL in those years? Or was he just kind of by default because he was the most well-known guy and he was winning the most games in a shitty NFC?
A little column A, little column B, I guess, Drew, but it was still really good numbers. And it's funny because, and I hate trying to be predictive or prescriptive, especially using something like this, but one of those was the fuck you year where he was mad. Sure. And like he is, one of those where it's like, can't you try hard all the time? Do you need to be mad at someone to like be good? It's crazy. Like, why don't you just give your best? But and he is kind of in that spot again. So yeah, maybe we get a little of that. I think the biggest takeaway I'd like to talk more about the year in between. And I don't know, maybe under the radar a little bit is the thumb injury. I mean, he could have been leaning on that a little heavier, but made it sound like he was playing with a broken thumb for quite a while. And I mean, it's still.
Well, then you should have beat the Lions and punched your ticket to the playoffs.
Yeah, I was happy they didn't.
I was happy they didn't also, but that's kind of.
I know, but it maybe does. Go look at the accuracy numbers. Like the accuracy stuff goes down because you're not gripping the ball same because your thumb is broke for 3/4 of a season. Like that checks out. And at the same time, he didn't like his receivers. He didn't want to hang out with him. He didn't like make an effort to work with him early on. They were young and needed that to get better. So the offense struggled because of it. He didn't seem engaged and he had the injury and he threw for like 3,500 yards. There's like 10 teams that would love to have a guy that, hey, we guarantee you'll have a quarterback that plays all year, throws for 3,500 yards. And it's crazy because it's such a down year for him. But I mean, if he's fully healthy and he has the right attitude and The play calling isn't I'm not concerned about Rodgers. I'm concerned about the system and the depth at wide receiver and people working with the kind of quarterback he is.
Okay.
I think I'm more worried about Hackett bringing him down than him not being able to get back to at least. He doesn't have to get an MVP season for the Jets to be good. He has to get to like 80, 90% of, maybe not even 90, 80%.
And really just his specific DNA of not turning it over might be enough. Because
Zach Wilson, the turnover worthy balls were heavy.
Yeah. So I knew this one before I even asked you. And, you look at EPA completion percentage over expectation charts from, 20 and 21, like he stands out like with a bullet, like he was the best by those measures. But reflecting on it in the hindsight with last year's data, I feel like he was in the right place at the right time in a weak time for quarterbacks otherwise, and had one of the best, generational receiver in his prime and kind of easy schedules, bad division and bad conference generally. Because like in 2020 and 2021, like I don't think Aaron Rodgers was keeping coordinators up late at night. They weren't scheming ways of we need to figure out how to stop Aaron Rodgers. I don't remember any playoff games where I was like, God, dude, what are they going to, I don't know how they're going to stop Rodgers. I mean, God, like, for whatever it's worth, like he was good and steady and low risk, which I think kept his ceiling lower, but his, statistical profile looks great on paper. And he specifically manipulated it to a degree by what he was doing at the quarterback position and where he was taking chances on the field. And, I think it limited the Packers' ability to ultimately succeed in a way that I think his on paper resume, it doesn't really, kind of check out, measure up with what I think, really was going on during this period of time. And so seeing last year where he was in the 20s is 20s expected going forward? No. But I think, it's pretty clear right now that his distribution ought to be centered in like the 10 to 12 range, and the upper end of it is the key question, right? If you're going to bet Jets anything, you need to think about what does the upper end of his distribution look like. And I think with this skill position group, with this offensive line, with this offensive coordinator, I mean, his ceiling has got to be 8, but maybe even that's giving him too much credit. I don't know.
My range is 8 to 12, and
okay.
I don't feel it like that's all on him. Part of that is, and this is applied to any position you're going to grade and rate and make a ranking for, is there's just some guys he's not going to leapfrog if they don't get hurt. Like, you're not bad. There's like 5 guys that are cemented into the top 5 for me. So, like, it's even if we can get to a spot where we're close to 2021, kind of in that range, I'm not so sure that's a better season than what we see from a full year of Burrow, obviously a full year of Mahomes, even the stat wise, at least, maybe not on the wins and losses, but a full year of Justin Herbert. Like, there's just too many good young quarterbacks. So like 8. This is the problem with doing rankings, when we talk about tiers, and somebody was talking about tiers the other day, and they said, like, Mahomes should have his own tier because of what he does. Absolutely. And so that leaves the guy at second. We'll always do this, like, what's the distance between second and third? What's the distance? It's the Scotty Scheffler thing. Like, hey, Scotty's first in a lot of things, but if you actually look at a chart, he's first in it by so much that it's sadistic that he's only won twice all year, didn't get a major. And it's the same kind of thing where if he's 8th in the league, that's really good, because unless there is some weird massive gap, because I think his ceiling, when we say it's 8th, is one thing, but his ceiling being within 10% of those top 5 guys, that's different to me, and that's enough. That's absolutely enough to the issue. And we're that's the next
Yeah.
tab. The issue is probably the schedule.
Yeah, because if he's in striking distance of Josh Allen and Tua, which is what 8th would be, then the defense is good enough for them to win enough games to win this division, I think.
Oh yeah.
I just am low probability that he hits the upper end of his distribution, and I'm low ceiling with what that actually is with this group.
I think there's if he's fully healthy and the offensive scheme isn't completely shit, he has a pretty narrow distribution. Like he is. Oof.
Yeah,
I threw up a little in my mouth there, but he's Kirk Cousins, man. Like
kind of.
I mean, he is. He's 4,500 yards. He's 30 touchdowns, and you shake hands on that because you're the New York Jets fans.
Yeah, right.
Holy shit, 4,500 yards. That's has Zach Wilson thrown for that in his career?
Yeah. Any intangible you want to mention about Aaron Rodgers for this season? Weight loss, mental, anything?
He does have the drug thing. Not that I don't. You take drugs, Aaron? Every day. Good boy. He seems to have mellowed a little at his age, which maybe isn't a good thing. I like fired up Rodgers. Like the most annoying thing about it, you talk about coordinators scheming, staying up at night, planning for him. The plan is don't be in a close game late because then there's no game plan for what he's doing on these. Oh, I went through my whole progression. You defended my whole progression well. Now I'm rolling out to the pocket, and Devontae Adams is, if you did the sketty chart of where he ran on the field, he just ran like 90 yards, and suddenly he's found a seam, and this is a 25-second long play somehow, and you're fucked. Like that's what's that was the worst part about betting against him. I'm sure playing against him is like what he was able to do out of structure. Brinson talked about this. I listened to Brinson's Jets pod a few days ago or whenever it was. And he talked about, I don't remember the wide receiver. He had an interview with a wide receiver. This is great. Brinson, good football follow. Obviously, you guys know that. He's been on the pod. But he did an interview with the receiver, and this was a Packers receiver, and he said, like, Rodgers made us work on that, where when he broke out of the pocket like that, we had a second route. He's like, and it was it was coming back usually, but it's like it wasn't just schoolyard football. Like that was a plan. That was something we put together, and that's why that was so effective. Like that. Yeah. And his fiery attitude and his ability to do that on a structure, which apparently was halfway structured anyway. That's what makes that's what's made him so dangerous. And obviously his really, really good decision making, like you mentioned, that's the biggest delta in this whole season is like how many balls that are going to be thrown that have a high probability of being a turnover is going to go way, way down because he just doesn't do that. He's really good at throwing a ball away when he knows things aren't. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to turn this into something. This has to stop. I'm going to live to fight another day. He's really good at risk calculation in split second timing. Okay. And and that's where I'm saying like I can't see him being worse than the 10th best quarterback. Okay. Like my range is probably like 8 to 10, and he's in 8 to 10 like 99% of the time.
Yeah, I'm in like that's fair. That is completely fair.
If he falls to the bottom of your range, if he falls to the bottom of your range, it's about the line. It's the offensive line we're going to talk about. Yeah,
so that's where we want to go now with the rest of the roster. On paper, this defense overall number 3, hurt by the Chuck Clark absence because that now makes your defensive backfield from number 1 to number 2. You have Sauce Gardner, who is it's impossible to overstate the degree to which he was the most impressive player from expectation to performance last year in the entire NFL.
Yeah, it's like you're top 3 corner now.
Top 2 now. I think it's him and Patrick Surtain. Both guys are super young, by the way. But those are Those are your top two corners. And the old saying and the old expectation was if you're a young corner coming to this league, like you're going to get your ass cooked for a couple of years before you figure it out. And he not only had it in year one, he had it so successfly that they just stopped throwing at him. Like he was just getting zero target share by the end of the season because there was no point. The rest of the defensive roster is awesome. Relatively high grade for me on DJ Reed, relatively high grade for me on Michael Carter. Not especially great, I guess. Actually, both these guys, now that I look at it, are just good, not great. Safety, Jordan Whitehead, good, not great. But the front seven is pretty outstanding, anchored by Quinnen Williams, who obviously just got paid. I played a little bit of him defensive player of the year in the 28-1 range, which I'm having a little bit of wishy-washy thoughts on. But his leap from year 2 to 3 was so great that it kind of tracks with like the Aaron Donald type of leap where he was just all of a sudden the best defensive player in football, clearly. And with the with the way interior defensive linemen are being utilized in today's game, I think he's a huge factor. CJ Mosley, I have an outstanding grade on at off-ball linebacker. And I think just overall, there's no real clear ways to take advantage of any of these players because I think a lot of Saleh as a defensive coordinator, I like his concepts, I like his vision, and they have the exact front seven pass rush that is really deep. Like wave after wave of young guys coming. They took a flyer on a reclamation project in Solomon Thomas. They drafted Will McDonald with their first overall pick. They have Jermaine Johnson coming in.
Will McDonald is like starting in a lot of places. It's like, oh shit, we need to plug this guy in. It's like, you're a rotational guy.
Yeah, it was all these guys. Jermaine Johnson
earn your snaps.
Yeah, so like the reserves of big bodies is set up in exactly the way that Saleh succeeded in San Francisco with ability to rotate guys in, have fresh legs in there the whole time, and get an effective pass rush based on scheme and just good, strong, good warm bodies.
You saw the same thing in Philly. Like, it's very, you see, the defense needs to take a timeout here when they're running a quick offense because both your DNs are just gassed. It just doesn't happen when you have 7 of them rotating through as far as your pass rush. So, all right. Anything else off season before we get to schedule? We are 42 minutes deep on the Jets.
That's okay. We needed to unpack all that Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
I have their skill position group 25th in the NFL, worst in your division. I have your interior offensive line 24th in the NFL, worst in your division. I have your O-line overall 27th in the NFL, worst in your division. So the supporting cast around Aaron Rodgers is bad. It's like add all that up. It's bottom 10, maybe bottom 5. Combine that with Nathaniel Hackett, and I think that is really where the vision went sideways for these guys this year. Now, I will say the skill position group, because there are so many young guys, they could take steps forward, sure. Like Garrett Wilson could break out in year 2 and be like, whoa, like he's in the conversation with the other offensive rookie of the years, like Jamar Chase and company, but I'm buyer beware on him just because I feel like he won it by default to a degree, and with the New York in general, the New York bump he got last year.
Yeah, there wasn't a quarterback to compete against, and a lot of the other wide receivers just didn't get target shares, didn't get the time, and it is. There has been a bit of this, and Justin Jefferson almost certainly joins that group of offensive rookie of the years that jumped up and took a huge leap. It's just you can't not give it to Justin Herbert that year. Of course. Fuck me, those numbers were wild. So it's there could be another big step forward. Like that's the biggest part to me was the depth wasn't there. Eventually, you knew that was your one read, and you had the 3-headed monster of Flacco, White, Wilson doing it. Like if that unlocked what we saw last year, especially from just like touchdown standpoint, like maybe the guy has a pretty high ceiling we don't even know about.
Sure, he made some good plays. I just think he's on a clear tier below some of the other young, good wide receivers.
Yeah, there's a lot of upside. We just it's not guaranteed kind of upside. We do need to see it. Breece Hall might never be good again. there are guys that just don't come back from that injury. As it's in the recent years, it's been easier to come back. I don't know if they're getting better at the surgery. I doubt that. It's more of people are getting better at the rehab and figuring out how to get them to where they need to be right away again. Okay. Imagine if Bo Jackson lived now. Jesus, Bo Jackson's alive. If Bo Jackson played now, that what he would have done after coming
in
back.
total, I gotta give the Jets a B, just because the offensive coordinator hire was suspect and they didn't do enough with the offensive line and the skill position group, and really they did too much to accommodate Rodgers in that regard. Like, be your own decision makers and go get guys who are good. Don't just get guys who are friends with Aaron Rodgers. Stupid. Anyway, let's look at the schedule.
Yeah, I'd C is deserved, but you can't get a C when you add a Hall of Fame quarterback.
No, I said B. I said B.
No, that's what I'm saying. I want to give it a C.
I see.
I can't do it.
I hear you. Okay. Schedule's tough. Starts tough, ends soft. Maybe that actually sets up for.
Yeah, that's the betting plan. I mean, well ahead of time. I had this one in pocket. Was like, there's no reason to bet the Jets now. Yeah. Unless you were a true believer that they're going to come into that bye with a winning record. I mean, what are your odds that they are 4-4? I feel like they'd have to be 4-2 there for them to have lower odds than they have right now. Because 3-3 feels pretty modal, and honestly, 3-3 feels maybe maybe a win, because that's a fucking tough start.
The first 6 weeks, there is no tougher schedule of opposing defenses. And the gap between them and the next toughest is a big one. They are really, really, really going to have a tough time taking off this season. And there's
only 2 road games. That's the thing, too.
It's rough.
Four out of 6 are home games.
Yeah.
And I still you have the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl. You have one of the best defenses in the league from last year. You have Dallas, who tragically underperforms, but they won't be hurt yet. Actually, they had an injury today.
Who got hurt? Yeah. I saw the safety. Yeah, it was one of their safety.
Yeah, safety got carted off. And then Buffalo, which is nothing to sneeze at nor start at. New England, you're praying New England doesn't have this figured out, because otherwise, are you a favorite? Because if you make it through that first stretch and you're like 1-3, are you actually favored on the road at Denver? That's probably coming down. Are you favored?
Yeah, you're right.
You might close. You might close as a favorite one time out of the first 6 games, which sucks. But if we believe in this team, boy, that there's a soft spot at the end of the rainbow here.
Well, let me ask you, what week 5, Nathaniel Hackett heads back to get a little revenge on the Denver Broncos. Yeah, a little revenge game for Nathaniel Hackett. What's a fair total there? Like 15?
I'm gonna take the Jets team total under 3.5 for the first half. The team totals are gonna be like when you're betting, the Citadel versus Bama. Even not joking, that might close under 40.
Oh, it should.
Probably should. 38.5, 39. Obviously they got stealthy, but those are some sick defenses, and who knows where we're at, because that's the other thing that kept coming up in basically everything I read, everything I listened to, any Jets content I took in. Hackett's offense is complicated, and it takes a while. And you have a very smart quarterback. We can shit on Aaron and his drugs and his weirdness and dating witches and losing too much weight and looking like the kind of guy who has to introduce himself to all his neighbors when he moves. But he is a smart person, and he will absorb that, and he's going to be fine. But they have a lot of youth, and they have a lot of question marks at skill positions, and you don't have strong, hey, you're my number 2 no matter what. There's a lot of ambiguity between 2 and 4 at the wide receiver. So it might take a little while to implement this offense as a whole. So I'm not very hopeful. Like 1-5 is in the cards.
Absolutely, yes. And at that point, you're not making your win total. I'm sorry. You may have a nice finish to your season, and maybe it's the opposite of last year where you don't make your win total, but we remember down the stretch you looked pretty good. Aaron Rodgers, he gave back some salary. He wants you to make some additions at the offensive line of wide receivers, and we're going to build on this success, even though they don't make their win total and they don't really threaten for the division and they don't really, not really in the playoff picture. But yeah, there'll be some times to bet this team down the stretch for sure. Don't love that sort of the weaker games in their schedule. There's a little bit of a disadvantage for them, like the at Vegas game, the at Denver game. They're traveling a lot, and it's not ideal. How many? They're playing. They're in prime time a lot. Oh boy. Oh no. This has real whiffs of Denver last year.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah. You get Aaron Rodgers, you're gonna get 6, 7. They'll probably get flexed into it. Like, what if Miami's really good? That Sunday game where it's week 15, like
dang.
That's right when you start flexing. Guess what? Yeah. Hey, New York, Miami, you're a Thursday game now because we're starting to do that.
Ooh, yeah, they're going to be in your face, and they might suck offensively. Okay, well, all right. No other real thoughts on the schedule other than this schedule to me looks tougher than Miami's, especially the way it starts, which matters for kind of building momentum as a team and building, having Marcus shorten. So this is a clear sign to chill the fuck out and not bet these guys for now.
It is weird to see a Friday on the schedule, Patrick.
Black Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at the odds. Unless there was something we're supposed to comment on.
No, I think the biggest takeaway is just it's a meat grinder to start. It eases up, and sentiment always swings. It will, and we might be looking at some discount prices. Like you head to the bargain bin and pick up some Jets with the right next to the $3 copy of Super Troopers 2. This is a bargain bin at the buy kind of thing, and that make the playoffs price. Like, there's no sense in laying -134 right now. Even if we succeed and it's like, hey, it's a 3-3 start, which I think is a win, that number's longer. I think there's always this is what we're doing. We're gambling. Anything can happen. Shit, I've made some really bad bets over the years where a team absolutely surprised me. So, this team there's a universe where they're 6-0. Of
course.
And all those numbers are blown up, and you should have bet them. But at the current prices and the current, distribution of results that you think you're going to see over those 6 games, I don't see a lot of spots where these numbers don't get bigger. So if you want some Jets, it really feels like a wait. And then also, don't just say I'm betting the Jets on the bye. Really take that week. You have the Jets not playing that week, so you have some extra time with those numbers. Look at those box scores, dig in, watch some highlights, read some stuff, really get a feel for if you think it's the kind of team that can turn it around against an easier schedule. There's always the, hey, I'm ready to bet this team because they're cheap, but I'm not seeing it. They didn't lose those games because those were tough teams and bad matchups. They lost those games because they're lost. The offense isn't clicking. They aren't getting it. Cobb apparently should retire at some point here.
Certainly there is precedent for an Aaron Rodgers team to improve over the balance of the season.
Yeah, relax.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples of them kind of finishing stronger than they start, which is even more reason to just chill the hell out on these guys. Super Bowl 16-1 is laughable, in my opinion. AFC 10-1. Now, I'm not ever going to play either of those. I don't think. I'm still not afraid of Aaron Rodgers in a playoff scenario at all. We haven't even got. We've been talking about, are they going to succeed in the regular season, Andy? Like, this team in the playoffs, you're gonna take the points with the Jets against an elite offense?
I didn't actually say it out loud, but I think that's why I pointed out the make the playoffs price instead of any of the other ones as an example. Like, there's a case to be made for tickling a 15-1 AFC East or a really big number at certain points there. But my target would for sure be make playoffs. I'm not excited about, it's like 100-1 to win the Super Bowl. Even if they come through that soft part of the schedule, it's not, it's not a team I'm super excited about backing in the playoffs.
Okay. Well, win total is 9.5 minus 122 to the over. Okay. Best of luck to you getting 10 wins out of this group. I think that's probably closer to a good outcome for them than an over 50% chance outcome in terms of the range of outcomes. The general, again, like, could they make
how many
teams?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
How many teams hit their win total? And we said they hit their win total because of the defense.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a tough one. Not when it's 9.5. Not when it's 9.5.
Yeah, no, it's like, their defense played better, so they got their 7th win and hit their win total. Yeah. Team, like, how many teams are like, they won 10, 12? Like, there are teams, and it still happens. But boy, it's few and far between. Yeah,
I will reserve judgment for betting the Jets in a game by game state as we get later in the season, depending on how the market matures. If some of those spots where they're looking like favorites, they're actually pick'ems or dogs, then, maybe we scoop a little buy low on these guys. But right now, I think the range of outcomes to me is below the market fair prices, which means if I had to make a bet on anything Jets this second, I already did make one on Quinn Williams, which I feel remorse about. But if I had to make one right now, I would just go find an alt under.
Yeah, a little under ladder, 9.876.
No, it's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad. I think they ultimately get 6 or 7. Schedule's not that hard.
No, I mean you could take the under at plus money right now and then come back with make the playoffs, shoot for a middle. Like
It's probably
the AFC's tough, but 9-8 is in the discussion.
They've got to beat the Patriots twice to get to 9, though, right? Don't
probably.
They? Yeah. Okay. Well, you could split with those guys. Okay. Well, betting plan of attack is pretty straightforward. What's the game total? Is it in the high 40s? Then I'm playing the under. I
go flow chart.
Dude, I will pay to see Nathaniel Hackett succeed. I'll pay to see it. I do not mind expecting these Jets to land in the low 20s pretty regularly. And the offensive line is a huge factor. The skill position group is a huge factor, but Nathaniel Hackett is number one on that list. So, it's just way too many parallels about what you were working with this year and what Denver had last year. Like it's a little spooky, I got to tell you.
What do we just say? Like, how often does a really good defense get you your win total when you have an old quarterback who's just not getting it with the new offense? Oh boy.
Yeah. Spooky. And Russ Wilson.
I mean, but to be fair, we weren't. We weren't talking about good young receivers last year with Denver or anything either.
I don't know. It was spooky. Offensive line that can't really pass pro. Is that going to matter? Well, when
if Rodgers shows up with like a Hummer H3 or whatever, do you remember that picture of Wilson?
I do. Then
we're fully there. But yeah,
I'm you know what I'm excited for, Andy? I'm excited for Robert Saleh to trot out Greg the Leg on Monday Night Football to attempt a 60-yard field goal to beat the Bills week 1. Because then the parallels will be perfectly complete. Greg the Leg is, of course, the Jets place kicker. And another parallel, man. The Jets are on Monday Night Football week 1. It's getting weird. All right.
I've never yelled at my TV as much as that one, I think.
That one was bad.
In a game, I'm not even sure I bet that game. I was just are you stopped playing for no reason.
Yeah. And hey, I mean, it's not like Aaron Rodgers has ever been on a team before where the coach has taken the ball out of his hands in a really meaningful moment and elected to kick a field goal. That's never happened.
The only
Oh, wait.
positive, the only
That happened
positive is
recently.
that Aaron Rodgers' likelihood of playing the Niners in the NFC title game is very
It's quite low. It's quite
low. So I will give him a little bump for that. So that is the Jets. If you have any other Jets thoughts, drop them in the YouTube comments. If you listen to this on a podcast, obviously hit us up on Twitter.
And with that,
and Birdie's asking about the offense because it's a hack. It is a bit of a Hackett offense. Like, I think it's going to be a bit of a new offense, and he does ask a lot out of people, and this is something he's admitted.
Yeah,
or there is a learning curve to putting it together, and I get the positive of having Lazard and Cobb, who are some guys who've worked with him and understand it. But there's I don't think it's going to be this understanding that LaFleur and Rodgers had, where they said, "Hey, this is kind of a middle ground we found where you're going to be able to do that," because there was a bit of headbutting at first, but he wasn't the play caller.
Yeah, that's the issue: is the play sequencing, the play design. Where Hackett I have as a borderline failing grade based on 1 year, and really, based on what we've seen from him to this point, but especially last year.
Because when Hackett did call offenses, they were different than what we have in the floor offense for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's put a bow on it and finish up the AFC East with our final team. Welcome to the deep dive. It is the Buffalo Bills. Maybe one of the most, I don't know what the right word is, but one of the most
maligned.
Divergent. Maligned. Sure. One of the most, for a team that didn't change much from 1 year ago to today.
I know.
My, how perceptions changed. They were the darlings of the 2022 preseason. They were the hot pick to win the Super Bowl. They were, at times, the shortest team to win the AFC. Josh Allen was your MVP favorite. And it seemed like this was a team that was finally going to get over the hump and present a true, meaningful challenge to the Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid dynasty. You will, of course, remember that the Bills only ended up winning one playoff game, still stuck in trying to get past the divisional round. And, oh, by the way, Pat Mahomes won ring number 2. So I think the perception around this team was that 2022 was a failure. I think that everyone would kind of measure against expectation and say they did not meet that expectation. And I think that has kind of led to a little bit of a souring of people who believed in the Bills, to the tune of, if the betting markets weren't well-informed, liquid predictions markets, then you would see some value on the Bills. But there's a big divergence between the way that this team is talked about and perceived versus what the market ultimately thinks about them. Is that a fair way to frame this campaign?
Yeah, I think the biggest, and I hate to use the word narrative, because narrative, the way we use it in our space and in this sort of industry is more of a, you're saying it's a fairy tale. You're saying it's Fugazi. I keep using Fugazi all season, I think. You're saying, it's something you're saying that doesn't actually hold any merit in the real world. But I'm going to use it anyway. The narratives are, he lost his play caller and he regressed a little. And people are even pushing his turnovers went way up and Daniel Jones's went way down. Like, we have double signal there. And the other, obviously the other narrative is the defense regressed quite a bit. And a lot of that was on, the DC, and he caught a lot of heat and said, was this team as good as we thought they were a couple of years ago? Was it really a great team? Was what they were doing have they caught up? Did they miss their window? How fast can a window close?
Closed? Yes.
How fast can a window close? And the answer is, if I was doing like a real dramatic video, oh man, we need like music over this. Like the 2022 Buffalo Bills. How fast can a window close? 13 seconds. sorry, I had to bring that game up, but like that was the best. That was the best team. And the sick part about all the things that we're dogging on this team for, they were 13-3, and those three. And yes, you can always take this the opposite direction of where I'm going and saying there were a lot of close games they won that they could have lost, but all of those games they lost, they should have won. Like the Minnesota game, that's a 99%er for sure. The Miami game, we already went over that. They gained 250 more yards than them, doubled them up. And then the Jets game the Jets played well on defense. I don't want to take any of the three. That was the most earned win, I believe, because the Jets did play well on defense. But that there were some turnovers there, and all they had to do was play a little cleaner football, and they beat a Jets team that's not as good as them. This is a team that's, probably, and it's weird saying 13-3 because I know what happened, but it keeps kicking in my head. Like, Andy, were you looking at the records from a different season? What are we doing here? But yeah, they did have one fewer game than everyone because of the Lamar Hamlin situation.
So you're going to have to bear with me because I didn't do my research on this particular point before bringing it up. But the Chiefs were the beneficiaries of the 1 seed and the bye with a record of 14-3. The Buffalo Bills, if they play that game to completion and beat the Bengals, which, you can postulate all you want, win or loss, who cares? But in the 50 whatever % chance that they had in the live win probability in that game, if that coin flip lands heads, Bills win, they get the 1 seed. They're not playing in round 1. Their guys get a week to get right. They're not in a hard fought contest against a divisional foe in round 1, followed by then having to beat Cincinnati and then having to beat Kansas City. Like if we are in the other universe where the Hamlin thing doesn't happen and the Bills win that coin flip, is the story different?
Yeah, I mean the win probability difference now for the 1 seed, where I almost want them to finally just get to 8 teams in the playoffs to get rid of that, because it really
it's huge. It's huge.
It's so penal for hey, you're the third best team in the NFL, or Christ, in a lot of cases, and I don't want to take away from Philadelphia because what they did was amazing, but the 2 seed in the AFC, in a lot of situations, is probably the second best team in the NFL, and they're penalized so heavily by not getting that bye, not getting the week off, not having to play, getting all the home games. So I do hope they go to 8 soon. I know we're going to get an 18th game anyway, so why not just fucking pull the Band-Aid off, do it all? But that was massive, and Birdie brings up the other big point that I hadn't gotten to quite yet, but the Von Miller injury was kind of big. It changed.
Sure.
It did change how that front played a lot, and it really did make them a lot beatable in a lot of different ways. And that's why they were in a lot of close games after that.
That was the second most impactful injury. The first was, I think, Josh Allen's elbow, which very, very much changed the way Josh Allen played football in terms of what they asked him to do, what he was able to do. But yeah, certainly Von Miller and the pass rush not being real mattered a ton in the game against the Bengals that ultimately ended their season. They had no pass rush in that game that I can recall. Bengals offensive line just pushed them backwards for 4 quarters.
The known strength, the Bengals offensive line.
Yeah, right.
The Josh Allen thing is important too, because when a quarterback is injured but doesn't miss time, But it is one of those things that's just out of sight, out of mind. We did the same thing with Rodgers. Like, hey, you have a broken thumb. How are you gripping a football? Weird. Your accuracy went way down. Like that's important. Same thing with the elbow. Like that definitely. Like, oh, he threw a lot more interceptions. He had a lot more turnovers. He was injured for a good spell there, and that matters. And we take that to just kind of forget about some of these things sometimes when we're looking back in the season. Like, oh, he regressed. It was Dable.
It was Dable. It was a partially torn UCL.
Yeah, it was.
That he missed
like
zero
he had
time
tennis
for.
elbow.
Yeah, he missed zero time for. I remember thinking there's no way he plays in this next game. I cannot remember which game it was. I'm gonna look it up.
Him and Herbert had the same thing. We said that we 100% said this on the podcast. We said we don't think he plays, but Herbert played. Like whenever it was, like maybe he just plays.
Top tier quarterbacks call their own numbers now. That's just the way the NFL is. There's no reason to have there's no reason to have a medical group. Okay, so to put a bow on the Hamlin thing, the Bills' path to get to the Super Bowl last year with the 2 seed was Miami. Granted, with the backup quarterback, I know. Miami, Cincinnati, Kansas City. And then you would have drawn Philly. Like, just an absolute gauntlet. And if you run that gauntlet...
That's like the Jets schedule.
Yeah, if you run that gauntlet, that's awesome, though. Like, that you really have... You've taken the crown, you deserved it. Yeah. The Chiefs, on the other hand, got Jacksonville at home, Cincinnati at home.
Who was coming off the mother of all.
Yes.
Just happy to be in the second round spots.
Just happy to be here. Yes. Yeah. So the Chiefs got 2 buys, and the Bills were facing a gauntlet. And I think that gets completely lost as people reflect on last season, and they're like, well, no, Chiefs dynasty. Bengals might be the second best team in the AFC. Burrow's the second best quarterback in the AFC. Like, this is all trickling down from what was really like kind of a no-win situation I think they were faced with, all kind of because they didn't get the 1 seed. And that doesn't help you for 2023 at all because, oh, by the way, your division is now much stronger. So it's getting stronger by the year. You're not afforded the same, kind of path to a home playoff game that the other AFC powerhouses are. So I think that it is a bit of an overstatement to really, kind of hold the Bills as a failure for last year and to really, underestimate their potential chances this year, which is why the market's not underestimating those chances this year. Market says Pat Mahomes has a 13% chance to win, 16% chance to win the MVP. Josh Allen has a 13% chance to win the MVP. That sounds right to me. Market says,
Showtime has a quick correction. Yeah. I'd forgotten that if the Bills would have made it that far, it would have been Atlanta? They would have done the neutral site AFC game, remember?
Oh, if they had made it to where? Yeah. If they had made it to the
if it was Buffalo, Kansas City, it would have been neutral site.
No, I thought that was
wasn't that a thing?
That was if Jacksonville beat KC and then Buffalo and Cincinnati were playing each other in the AFC Championship game, then that would have been the neutral site. That's
really?
In the back of my head, that's what I remember. Because I'm pretty sure that KC had the 1 seed. No bones.
I thought that was what they took away from them because they got the 1 seed by default.
Well, then why did Cincinnati have to go to Kansas City then?
I think Cincinnati was a beneficiary of the whole situation. Where Buffalo was kind of the team that got boned. So they said Buffalo doesn't have to play an AFC title game on the road. If they play a higher seed, it'll be on a neutral site. None of this matters, but that was a weird situation. Yeah, that was a weird situation.
My point was more about strength of my point was more about strength. You
still have to play Kansas City, and honestly, I don't know if I want to play Kansas City on turf.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. Okay, so the start to their season was impressive. They rack up 6-1. With the one loss being the one we talked about on Monday, the completely inexplicable outperform but lose against Miami. And they were pretty good against the spread. I have a start of 4-1-1 before they lost 3 in a row. I think that Josh Allen injury to his elbow came against the Jets in the 3-point loss to the Jets. And then I expected him to miss some time. And honestly, with your opponents, next 3 opponents being home Minnesota, home Cleveland, at Detroit, I kind of find it inexcusable that they put Allen out there instead of letting him get to be 100%. Like, you banked wins. You were in good position. You weren't obviously in control of the 1 seed at that point, but you had beaten Kansas City head to head. You had beaten Baltimore head to head. And, you at least had, your 2 losses were in division. So maybe you felt a little bit of pressure there, but your next 3 games were out of division. 2 of them out of conference. Like, give your guy a chance to get right. Instead, they push him out there. They lose in absolutely insane fashion to the Vikings, a game that I will still never understand how that happened before, an ugly win versus Cleveland and a really ugly win on Thanksgiving against Detroit. I would say that 3-game stretch was Allen's least, worst performances of the season. The narrative switched from him being a obvious bona fide MVP candidate, favorite, to all of a sudden he's making too many turnover worthy plays. He was actually making turnovers. Like, he was all of a sudden, a little bit of a leaky ship there. He was trying to do too much. His short to intermediate ball was really inaccurate. And I think, I am perfectly fine ascribing all of that to dealing with a partially torn UCL.
Yeah, it was the Jets game. It was late. That game ended essentially with the Bills turning the ball over on downs with a pretty ineffective Josh Allen. And like you said, it was a surprise. And he wasn't awful in that game against Minnesota. Minnesota was good at the end. It wasn't too long ago since I'd watched that episode of Quarterback. My kid was so excited, like, oh man, Minnesota's losing. And I just don't have the heart to tell him, like, this isn't live. Like, we're watching this on Netflix. He just doesn't understand what live sports are, really. Like, oh man, it'd be crazy if they won this, right? But that was just fluky. He actually played a lot better than I thought would, considering the injury. But it did, I think it did play a big part in, some of the turnovers we saw down the stretch. And they still won most of their games down the stretch. I mean, that Viking was the Vikings game the last loss before the playoffs. Yeah. I mean, the Bengals game was a coin toss that didn't happen, but the Lions game was tough fought, but that was on the road. They actually played, remember, 2 weeks in a row in Ford Field. They had a good beginning. Cleveland wasn't a great team, but they were in a really fucked spot where they were picking up players with snowmobiles and stuff to get them to the airport so they could fly to Detroit and play the Cleveland game.
That's right.
And then they played a good, the defense was struggling and they played a good offense on the road on turf. And they got a nice win against Detroit. The Patriots game, it's just a good matchup. The Jets, for some reason, the Jets and the Dolphins played them tough both times. And they got those wins. They beat the shit out of the Bears, which they should have. At that point, the Bears were happy to take it in the chin, and then it got weird. The injury we'll never really fully understand because we don't know what's inside the heart of a man, or obviously between his ears. But there's no chance that didn't affect everybody on the team.
Of course,
in a lot of different ways, and they still put a pretty good effort forth in the playoffs. And like you said, they had a grind. And Birdie points it out, if there was a winner in the Cincinnati Buffalo game, whatever team won that would have gotten the 1 seed.
Yeah,
which we might have seen a different Super Bowl contestant. Yeah, the double game in Detroit, they had a weird season. Yeah, they were 13-3. It was a really good year, and I think your main overarching point is like, why are we so hard at this team right now?
Well, I think it's just a matter of the way they're talked about and just in general people's spirit and feeling about putting their neck out and saying that this team's going to win this year. They're hesitant. A lot easier just to say Mahomes is going to do it again, even though on paper the Buffalo Bills have a much stronger roster. And I think, yeah, the way it ended is completely rational reason why people are hesitant. The loss to Cincinnati, in the playoffs was aggressively bad game plan and game management, I thought. Certainly, and this is revisionist history. I don't mean to be a Bills apologist, and I don't mean to come down especially hard on their coaching staff, but I thought they completely bungled a game plan in that game. It felt like they had game planned to play Cincinnati in a dome, and here it was 32 degrees, windy, with slick conditions on the field as snow was flying, and they were completely unable to manifest a pass rush, which happens on a slick field, as we very well remember from the Super Bowl.
We saw that twice where it's like there's a pass rush that is not getting it done.
They're on ice skates.
They're slipping around out there.
And their opponents realized, well, if it's slick, let's lean into the run. Let's make this a physical trench warfare instead of what the Bills had planned for, which was they thought they were going to air it out. They gave them so much space and separation to that really good wide receiving core underneath. And honestly, Joe Burrow just absolutely picked them apart in that game.
You started that thought with they went in with a bad game plan, which I agree with you is a crime and a sin at the highest level because it's the playoffs and your window is not big. But I think the greater sin is not having having a fallback, having the ability to adjust.
Sure.
Like that's the biggest thing you see in this. This is the teams that we love. Obviously, the teams we really love have great game plans. Like going in with a great game plan is best case. But if the game plan doesn't work, because it doesn't always work, that's where we see the greats. Like how many stories are there about Belichick where it's like, hey, the pass wasn't working, so they ran the ball 50 times and beat that team. Or the refs were they weren't calling a certain penalty and Bill pushed it to the nth degree until they called it, and they had a huge advantage in that game because the receivers were essentially getting tackled. To be able to adjust in game for what's going on is the greatest skill a coaching staff can have. That was what just drove me nuts. It's like none of this is working. What are we doing? Like this is what we're gonna, because this isn't even a good game now. Yeah,
and as soon as there was a deficit, they made you made the key point. They made no adjustments to their offensive game plan. They didn't have a plan B, and that was actually the entire takeaway that you have from that season of Josh Allen and the elbow injury was there was no plan B, none.
No.
And I think that shaped a lot of their offseason based on the moves they made. And I think my kind of final thoughts about the Bills 2022 season is they were extremely unlucky when it came to injuries in about every way you could possibly imagine. Bunch of key players missed on defense. We didn't mention, Hyde and Poyer. That's both your safety tandem. One of them missed the whole season. One of them missed most of the season. Von Miller going down hurts, and you build an old defense. Sometimes you lose important pieces. Like that's kind of the way it goes. Tre'Davious White never came back. Like there was a lot of players missed time. Your second out in your skill position group, and Gabe Davis gets hurt in week 1 or 2, never emerges. Your offense revolved around if Stephon Diggs can't make a miracle happen here, we're going to have to go to plan B, which is Dawson Knox. No run game to speak of. Offensive line was tested pretty regularly because everybody was expecting to pass consistently, and it was predictable. There was no tendency breakers. There was no adjustments, and I think it's fair to hold that against these guys in terms of ultimately realizing their potential this year. If you're gonna have a reason, that should be it.
And I did want to just point to one comment quick because it needs a little shine. Michael says he still can't get over that Justin Jefferson catch. I just rewatched that. Like the low probability things that happened to this team to give them several losses is amazing. And for my money, and you can argue with me all you want, I'm not going to budge on this. For my money, that catch was better than the OBJ one-hander.
Oh yeah,
I mean that was an interception that he took away with one hand, and considering the point in the game
it
when
was
it happened,
4th and 18, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 4th and forever, and they needed to keep it going. Like that was a gasp. That was like a full gasp for me. It was really something. So yeah, the Bills kind of took it in the shorts in some weird ways, and like you said, you drive an old car, you're going to have car problems. That's what happens when you have an old defense. So, that sort of thing happens, and the coaching staff is not completely absolved of their sins. That'll be the biggest thing. There's always these things. What are we looking for this year?
Yeah.
And obviously, we're looking for Josh Allen to be healthy, and if that elbow's healthy, and we just see the turnovers go way down, then we can say later in the season that was the reason we can be in on him as a top, 2-3 quarterback right off the bat again. Like he's back, he's elevated himself to MVP levels because of the addition of what he can do in the run game. And, my other big thing, obviously, is like, does this coaching staff learn its lessons from what happened last year? So that's the big thing. So, off-season changes.
Well, actually, one thing real quick on 2022. I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
Did you know they were an under team last year?
And they just had some high totals.
Their totals were screaming high.
A few of the division games, like the first Miami game, that only got to 40 with like 800 yards. The Chiefs game was 24-20. That certainly wasn't a 44-point total.
Yeah,
they played some the both Jets games where neither of them got to.
Yeah,
no, those were
they were
0-5,
0-5 against. They were pretty much a neutral bet, but they were 0-5 against the Jets and Dolphins. Could not cover the spread against those teams. They went 7 to the over, 11 to the under over the balance of the season. Every game that was over 50 went under. So there was a weird mixed signal where you were expecting a big time shootout scoring, and honestly, I think they won all those. Oh, they lost the Miami game, but they did their part in almost all of those games. 31, 28.
Bears. What was the total in the Bears game?
Their defense
48
did the job. Yeah, Bears total game. That total was 40.
They had
scored
35.
Yeah. No, so basically, is a matter of like every time they went up against a decent offense, their defense performed. And kept them in a lot of regular season games, which is pretty wild. So yeah, I missed it entirely that they were an under team last year. I don't remember playing many of their totals. So offseason moves were pretty focused, I thought. They let some of the age and some of the, kind of guys that are expensive at non-premium positions walk out the door. Devin Singletary, replaceable at running back, walk out the door. Tremaine Edmonds, replaceable at linebacker, walk out the door. You got a bunch of guys that didn't really contribute, and Crowder and Bobby Hart and Jaquan Johnson, Isaiah McKenzie. Like none of those guys really moved the needle at all, and they're all gone. Roger Saffold was the only guy that I had as a meaningful, kind of above replacement player who is out. I think he's retired, right? I think he retired because he is out of the league, and he still had a little left in the tank, but he is gone. So that's kind of the only important thing you had to replace. I believe, did they specifically go get Shell to replace him, Brandon Shell? That's a downgrade. But the rest of the guys they brought in, I guess they got Connor McGovern from Dallas. He's good as their guard, and Brandon Shell is now your swing tackler. About your depth piece in the offensive line room.
So, and we went over a lot of other stuff, and especially we've dug deep on this coaching staff, but I guess this goes a little deeper because this goes into the front office too. I don't fully understand what they want to do with the run game. If it's just like, we're happy enough with what we get with Josh Allen, and anything else is icing. Because like you drafted a running, it wasn't high, super high, but you drafted Cook, and then but yeah, we're not gonna feature him. Like, and then you like go and yeah, I mean he. Not something I thought I'd utter a lot this preseason, but he suffered a freak jet ski accident. You go like get Nyheim Hines, and then it was another one too. It's like, well, you're just not going to use him. It doesn't make sense what they're deciding to do. It's like, oh, we like this running back. We're going to go get this running back, and then we don't really want to we don't want to take him out of the case like that. It loses its value then. It's just it's a weird run scheme. It's kind of a weird offense. And I get it. It's hard to knock a team because it's been such a successful offense. But I would have liked to see what they were going to do with Hines this year. And then that's the other thing. If I had 3 wishes, it'd be all the money in the world, all the the greatest sports almanac, and then getting to actually see like a 3D rendering of what happened there. Because my mind can't stop thinking about that. And it's one of those where I get, where you get like the cold shivers because you're like, oh, fuck. I imagine he was like, straddling a jet ski and another one hits him like in the leg. Can you imagine that? I'm not saying
Terrible.
That's what happened, but that's all I can think about. And then I get the cold shivers. But I hope he's, obviously I hope he heals up good because it sounds like a fucking terrible way to ruin.
Yeah.
It's probably a fun day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they're down a running back. I don't think that's obviously it's a loss, but what they do with running back, maybe I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Watercraft injuries are scary. All right. The additions they made, none of these guys super move the needle for me, although they're all good players. You added depth. You got good, some good players to contribute on the second, for your reserves here. The big name was Leonard Floyd. I like him. I think that's a really nice piece to help your pass rush rotationally. And I think, the pieces you retained is maybe more of interest. The offseason didn't get off to a great start from a minicamp standpoint, as Stephon Diggs was notably unhappy to start minicamp. And the coaching staff kind of, they said some weird stuff about it, ultimately walking back a lot of comments. I don't really think he's a super happy camper there. Les Frazier, do you think Les Frazier elected to take time off, or do you think he was asked to take time off?
I think that was one of those mutual decisions. Like, hey, Les, do you want to get fired or do you want to step away?
Yeah. So I guess the question is, does the losing at the end of the season and the sour taste in everybody's mouth, does that pervade the locker room itself?
I think it's they've always had a good culture there. And if the Diggs Allen stuff is overblown and they're boys, then I'm not too worried about it. They've been through tougher things. They had a player die. I think we always say, like, how did that affect them mentally? There's definitely a galvanizing effect to the way the city and the NFL and just football in general kind of rallied around them about that. They've been through some shit. They had a hell of a year, so it's
basically,
it's
if they
not,
win,
it's
a winning
yeah,
start.
Winning cures everything.
Yeah. Okay. On paper, this team is elite. I have them as the second best starting unit in totality. I have them with the second best reserves also, which means this year, if injury bug bites them again, the guys who will be coming in won't represent a huge step down outside of the quarterback position. That's the only reserve group that's really a question mark.
You mentioned too, I really like what they've put together over the last 2 seasons now as far as a pass rush / just front 7 rotation. Like if they stay healthy, they're going to be a pain.
Yeah. Offense, I have rated fourth in terms of personnel. Defense, I have rated second in terms of personnel. I'm perfectly prepared to admit that I am high on the defense. Like, if they don't finish in the top 5, I'm not going to be surprised, because I think, there's still a lot of scheme things that they do that I don't entirely think are perfect for today's NFL. The offensive line I have is a top 7 unit. Interior offensive line, though, I see a couple weaknesses. Skill position group is only borderline top 10. I give you the second best quarterback in the NFL. I have you as the best front 7 overall, top 3 in terms of off-ball linebackers, top 2 in terms of pass rush. Your defensive backfield is where I ding you on defense. And I see upside here, because if Tre'Davious White is the guy we remember from a million years ago, we're going to be talking about him in the same conversation as Patrick Surtain and Sauce Gardner. Like, he's potentially a lockdown corner if he is healthy. And Kaiir Elam showed enough flashes last year that I think he's fine. And nickelbacks and your specialty packages have some talented players. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are on the decline. That's unmistakable. Which
still
means,
good though.
Yeah, still good. But if you have a weakness, it's your safeties. Was that all a fair kind of reading? And is there anything that I just rattled off that didn't pass the smell test in terms of the strength of this roster?
No, that all kind of checks out. And if you want to have a weakness and defense, I guess I'll take safety. If you had to pick, maybe I don't know, maybe middle linebacker, but safety.
Matt Milano begs to differ, Andy.
No. I'm saying if you had to say you have one weakness on defense, like
the middle linebacker position specifically, Terrell Bernard.
Terrell?
No idea who that is.
We'll
that's the guy you're backfilling for Tremaine Edmonds, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying I'm not terribly worried about safety with the upside we have at corner and the pass rush they're putting together. So
yeah, if Terrell Bernard, don't worry, if Terrell Bernard doesn't work out, we got Dotson. Dotson is here.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Off-season grades are hard. There wasn't, like we said, you don't see a lot of change at the top. Like, that's ideal.
Yeah,
you run it back, you backfill, you build depth.
This pass rush is freaking nasty, man.
Yeah, they did add. They added to that. That's what I'm saying. They added to that.
Greg Rousseau
has a ton of upside.
Good young player. Daquan Jones, super solid. Ed Oliver, super solid. Von Miller, elite upside. Leonard Floyd, maybe one of the best kind of backup pieces that exists on any roster. My goodness gracious, those 5 men right there, 4 of them are healthy for you. You're cooking with gas in the pass rush department. You're putting away leads.
You have a lockdown corner to go.
I didn't even mention Shaq Lawson is depth for you. Puna Ford is depth for you. AJ Espinosa. These guys are depth for you. Jordan Phillips is depth for you. Like, these are all guys that could very easily start in the NFL, and they're your depth, which I think if they're aggressive defensively, if they're wave after wave of pass rush kind of mentality, if Sean McDermott comes in with a mindset that is not, if plan A doesn't work, we're screwed, then this defense is going to be freaking elite, and these guys are going to win games, and it's going to be pretty good. I give him an A for the offseason.
And like you said, if you are trying to defend a team who's coming back from a multi-score lead with that pass rush that you can throw wave after wave, you have a good shutdown corner, you have enough pieces to take care of the coverage, you're going to be tough to beat. And I think, 12, 13 wins is definitely in the card again. I'm skipping off-season grade. They get a B+ for signing Floyd because not a lot changed.
Okay.
You sign Floyd and you let people jump their tables. You're good here. B+.
Okay.
On to the schedule.
A lot of blue on the lines here. You start out with as a small favorite on the road on Monday Night Football against the Jets, who we just talked about. That's been an interesting market. You seen that bounce back and forth between 3 and Pick'em, and it's probably going to land somewhere in the middle. I don't know. Count me in on Bills on Monday Night Football, I think. Count me in on under, too. You see that total is sitting at like 47.
Somebody brought that up.
Yeah, I think the pass rush is going to be able to distinguish you in that game and ruin Aaron Rodgers' home debut. Not a lot of games on this schedule where I'm like, boy, that looks like a scheduled loss. You have a very tricky contest at Philly before your bye, and then come out of your bye and you get KC. I mean, if you let the Buffalo Bills write their own schedule, where would you put Kansas City, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, if you had to play them, like, well, does it have to? Yeah, it has to be in the road. Well, fuck, at least give me a bye then.
Yeah, and that is offset by losing a home game versus the Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars aren't the world's most scary opponent, surely, but having a home game turn into a negative travel spot's pretty fucked up, I have to say. You get to go to London instead of having a home game, and they have already been there for a week. Is wild. There is some soft spots in this schedule, and I can entirely see getting to that head-to-head against Cincinnati at the beginning of November, and entirely possible this team is undefeated. I think modal outcome is probably 2 losses. I mean, there's kind of a concentration around 1 or 2 here. I mean, the games where you're a small fave at the Jets and at New England, I'll lay the points with the Bills in both those spots and not really lose sleep over it. Like those good matchups for this team.
Yeah, what did we just shit on the Jets about?
Their offensive line sucks.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we're gonna throw 7 good pass rushers at that offensive line. Your quarterback is, AARP eligible. Like that could go poorly. Yeah, no, I obviously, like you said, those small favorites, those are good matchups. And there's a decent chance they rattle off a ton of wins to start the season. And it is a very tough stretch in the middle. Cincinnati, Philly, Kansas City on either side of the bye, Dallas Chargers, and then you're closing. Everybody closes with the division game. You had to pick one division game of the 6 that is the worst. It's at Miami. Like that's the one I don't want to close with. So it's a little oppo of the Jets. For the second half of the season is where the challenges come. That said, it's a good enough team to beat Philly at Philly. It's a good enough team to run with KC. It's good enough to that's the other part. Like KC, Philly, and Cincy. If you pick the 4 best teams,
you're playing the 3 toughest teams in the NFL on the road. Yeah,
on the road. Between that and the London thing, as we'll call it, the London debacle, they really didn't get a lot of favors in the schedule. And at the same time, there's 11, 12 wins happens an awful lot of times with the schedule anyway.
Yeah. Is there like a student? Is there a funny the London screw? There's a funny name we can come up with for that. We have London.
I thought of the London Eye, a play on words of the London Eye, the London Bridge.
We'll
come up with something.
The Tower of London. There's something there. We'll figure it out we have until October 8th. All right. It's a good, this is as favorable, I think, as you can ask for, despite being a really difficult, first place schedule. And, you run the risk, I think, of circling some games like Cincinnati, like KC, like Philly, that, maybe you put a little bit too much on to get those wins. But the benefit of doing that is that, if you can secure the 1 seed, then all of a sudden Kansas City's got the gauntlet this year. and you get to kick back and play the Jags and the Bengals.
You just shovel snow that week instead of playing.
Yeah. So
have some hot wings, but yeah, tough schedule.
Yeah.
If you want to pull up the odds, producer Dan, they are one of the favorites, 9-1 to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
4.5 to win the AFC, plus 130. It's a pretty good number. There's places down to 125.
Yeah, I like
to win the AFC East, and then minus 245, plus 194 for playoffs. Win totals 10.5. 10.5. Juice to the over, which is where it should be.
Yeah, I think all of these numbers are pretty fair.
Crispy.
But I also can tell you that of every team we've talked about who has a realistic chance to win the Super Bowl to this point in our podcast series, this is the team that is the most likely to shorten based on sequence of schedule. And I think it's not going to take much in terms of overperforming expectation in the first quarter of the season for the bandwagon jumpers to fully populate the Bills bandwagon. Do you have the same sentiment that the market is going to be aggressive in upgrading? Because these are already short prices. Like, Bills are your third choice right now after the Chiefs and the Eagles. Better odds to win the Super Bowl right now than the Bengals. Better odds to win the Super Bowl than the Niners. That's right. But I think this gets short. I think they shorten even more aggressively if people get a taste of, any type of their ceiling early in the season. Now, that said, I would rather we see the best of the Bills at the end of the season, not the beginning.
When a team performs well, but they weren't expected to, and they haven't done it before, it takes a while for the market and the sentiment to warm up to them. When a team performs well, and, even if it's not, let's say that team, the first example, performed like 30% better than implied. It doesn't take that 30% better, because 30% better is too much for the Bills. It just don't have that much room. It doesn't take a really high-end performance for the market to warm up really quick. Like you say, that's where I'm fully agreeing with you on that. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a team that almost made the Super Bowl. This is a team that can beat everybody. Like, oh, shit. Remember Josh Allen that was just a hiccup last year. Like, he's great. Like, there's a very likely spot where we're 7-8 weeks in where Josh Allen's the MVP favorite, and the Bills have the shortest odds to win the AFC and the Super Bowl because they were able to take care of, the 2 or 3 coin flips along with the other games that they should have won, and they're sitting at like 8-1, 9-0, something like that. And it's not going to take very much to swing the market their way, like you're saying.
Yeah. And honestly, the schedule and the sequencing, I think this is your last undefeated team.
Yeah. And obviously they're one of the favorites, and a couple of people have already talked about AFC East priced. Yeah.
It's going to be short.
I said value, right off the beginning of the Jet spot, I said the Miami numbers. Probably wrong, but that's a minus number 5 weeks in. Like, you're going to get, if you want to just make 5 bets, cash 3 out. You have a cash out book, just take some free money and stuff. 11-1 last undefeated Charles Saul. Appreciate you chiming in with some odds there. That's not a bad look for a fun bet.
Yeah. And a
lot of spots where they're 7-8 now. Pretty.
So I haven't bet any of this yet, even though we're making this very impassioned case that these numbers are going to shorten. So I probably ought to talk through this and you tell me if this is stupid. Okay.
Oh, don't worry.
I am worried about how this team survives the gauntlet if they don't get the 1 seed. I think that these numbers in reality are realizable only in that world. I don't love the idea of the Bills putting their best stuff on paper against all these teams in the regular season and then being able to replicate it or exceed that in the playoffs. I still have questions about the play calling. I still have questions about the coach in terms of game script, game planning, in-game decision-making. Sean McDermott has never answered the questions that I would like to see him answer about making the right decisions in game, about going for it. Think about what the Eagles did last year in their Super Bowl run with Jalen Hurts converting every 4th and 1 with the scrum play. You have Josh Allen. He's even bigger. He's even more effective at doing that sort of thing. Like, you realistically should be
a bigger sample of doing it.
And you should be the most aggressive team on 4th down in the NFL by far, because you have the highest likelihood of converting it by far.
I'll push back on that.
Oh, you think Philly's better? You think KC's better?
I don't think Philly's maybe Philly's better, but there's not a huge gap. Like Philly has such a fucking. It's like the annoying play Well, it's like the annoying play on Madden that's like broken and just always works. So like, no, I mean, but what you said isn't wrong. Like they have such a good 4th down play as well. Like, yeah, you should be uber aggressive. Yeah. You should be the coach who's thinking ahead. Like, hey, I can run plays right at or short of the sticks on 3rd down because I'm going for it.
Yeah, I'm in the back of my head, I'm worried about the coach and the decision making and the going gets tough. In the back of my head, I'm worried about the game planning, because even though your skill position group is top 10, it's really only one guy. And I think last undefeated team, all of these prices shortening, losing all that value. I'm prepared to be in the playoffs against them, even if they have the beneficiary, if they're beneficiaries of injury luck, if they have the 1 seed, if their path is the easiest, I'm okay being against the Bills, I think. So I've come full circle from the beginning of the pod where we were like, why does everybody hate these guys and no one wants to plant their flag, and why is sentiment a little sour? I think it's fair not to waste capital on Bills outrights. Am I nuts?
If I was going to bet it right now, it would just be division stuff. And then, like you said,
last undefeated team is my favorite bet for them.
Especially if you pair it with what's the number we're going to get on the Jets, 5, 6, 8 weeks in, and and then just kind of monitor and actively manage for Miami.
Yeah, they don't play Miami until they play Miami week 4. It's in Buffalo. That'll be a big one that'll swing that division big time. So betting that game is the same as betting division now, I think.
Yeah, I'll probably just bet division anyway, especially if I find a good price. I'm gonna hunt around on that. I think I might be doing that, but
okay.
Yeah, and Sam points out exactly what you said earlier, kind of phrased it a little differently, and I understand what he's getting at. It's like, that the smart teams with the smart coaches, the Spags and the Anarumos of the world, they know what's coming. You have to be better.
They're too one-dimensional.
You have to be better as a coach.
Yeah, they need to show tendency breakers, growth, multiplicity. When the going gets tough, different ways to win. I don't think you're going to front run. You're not going to front run your way to a Super Bowl in this very, very, very competitive AFC. I don't think. That's kind of my closing thought on the Bills. Even though I freaking love this roster, love Josh Allen, I think it's a narrow range of outcomes. By the way, this team's in the playoffs, and I'm kind of I wouldn't hate if they ultimately stumble early. They're losing to teams we were like, wow, maybe the stink is on these guys. If they're playing their best football down the stretch instead of at the beginning of the season, then their chances are going to be better. This is going to be an easy team to convince me to buy into them if they're not playing well.
Especially it's like, I'm getting them as again, I understand it's a good team and it's on the road, but I'm getting them as an underdog. This is one of the best rosters on the planet. Getting them as an underdog against Philly because it's a road game. It's inexperienced team.
Dude, you know what I would love, Andy? I would love to be able to bet Bills week by week in the playoffs as the spoilers. Like that would be awesome, right? The full on Ons Jabeur revenge tour where she beats a dog and she wins 3 in a row, and then the Bills are favored in the Super Bowl and
gets to the playoffs, gets to the Super Bowl and loses to like the Saints.
Yeah, somebody terrible. Yeah, somebody completely unexpected makes this Yeah.
Oh my God, we just lost to Carolina in the Super Bowl.
So I think
that's niche.
It's very niche, yes. But I will tell you, if the Bills are, doggish road spoiler, that's a fun playoff run. I'll be for sure riding. But the opposite, if they are front running and they are not showing multiplicity, if they're not showing different ways to win specifically on offense, then I think this is a team I don't mind being against in the playoffs.
I'm with you.
Okay.
So, all right, as I said at the end of the Jets show, and maybe you listen to this separately as a podcast, if you have anything that you think we missed or any points you want to bring up, any questions you want to answer, put them in the YouTube comments, put them on the Twitter, put them in the Discord.
I have a huge.
There's so much more to talk about.
I have 2 huge questions for you. 2 talking points we didn't get to.
Who's Barbie? Who's Oppenheimer on this team?
Obviously. No, the first is Sean McDermott more likely to be fired after the season or in the coach of the year race? Just fired. Those 2 choices. Fired.
Coach of the year, it's hard to reach for him because of the success they've had already.
And easy cross off in the coach of the year market. Most likely award, Josh Allen MVP. How many interceptions is too many to ultimately win that award? Because I feel like 10. That's kind of the only number that matters, right? 10. So if he has double-digit picks, he's out of the running.
Maybe. I mean, it depends. Like, it's one of those, like, if it's a 50-10 season, the 10 doesn't look so bad. If it's 32-10, a little different. 10 or 12 feels like it's a little too much. Yeah,
Josh, I remember I had some Josh Allen MVP last year, preseason, and he threw, they beat the shit out of the Rams in the opener in LA, and his price shortened, but he threw 2 picks. And I remember being like, oh boy, like, we got to keep an eye on that particular number. He finished with how many last year in total?
13. 13 sounds right.
13 sounds right.
I'm not looking it up. I hope you are.
I am looking it up. He only had 16 games. He had 14 picks last year, 15 the year before, 10 the year before. So he's prone to throwing the picks.
Cut it out, Josh.
I think that's going to get counted against him, even if otherwise his EPA per play is in the rare air with the Pat Mahomeses and the Joe Burrows of the world. So
sure. I
think I'm out on Josh Allen MVP this year.
It's tough. I could be pulled back in, though. I'm not saying you can't win me back. We've all had that one ex-girlfriend, so.
Yeah. Okay.
But all right, let's call it a night. We'll be back next week. I'm not even telling you what division we're doing because we don't know. We're going to decide off the air, and we'll let you know soon. By all means, hit us in the comments if you have somebody you want us to get to. But I'm glad we did this one this week. It was a ton of fun. I appreciate you guys. Hit the thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. That helps us a lot on the YouTube algorithm stuff. That's the least you can do is thumbs up and subscribe. We appreciate you. Appreciate all the comments, and we'll see you next week.
I mean, the Bills is easy. It's obviously Angry Ken. The Oppenheimer on the Bills is much tougher. You got a name?
Ooh.
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is Oppenheimer? No.